What is up? Dr. Lauren Duroy, and I'm coming at you today via a hotel. I was hoping to be live with you all in my home, and I had a last minute, honestly, opportunity that was really incredible. I'm being asked to speak this exact presentation that I'm giving to you all for free at a high level, high paid presentation. So you're going to be getting this information for completely free, and I'm really excited to be giving this to you. Welcome to our next Overwhelmed Overflow Challenge. I'm so glad that you're here today. I just want to start by saying that if you are here today and you are feeling burned out, overworked, underpaid, you're feeling just all the things in your life, friend, I've been there before. And my goal is to absolutely transform your life. How my life has been transformed. This is not some kind of woo-woo science. This is something that is truthfully evidence-based and completely cutting edge. So it's a little bit different than what you maybe have heard and learned about before, but nonetheless, what we're going to dive in today is going to transform your life if you're able to really just dive all in and take this in. So who would like some quantum leaps in their life? Who would like to go from completely overwhelmed to really feeling the abundance and overflow in your life and not feeling overwhelmed? That's what we're here to do today. So I don't just actually come to you as a provider, I come to you as a past patient. I had severe depression, anxiety, I had severe IBS, and I was scoped up, down, left, right. It developed into bilateral joint pain in my shoulders, my knees, my hips. I kept on telling my husband I always have bad feet. Would you rub my feet for me? They always hurt so bad. And I was anxious, and my cycles were regular, but honestly, they came with pretty severe PMS, and I would sometimes even have rages. Embarrassed to say that, but it is true. And I was taken to a point where I just really felt horrible. I felt like a failure as a Christian. I felt like a failure as a wife. And I was terrified to become a mom, even because I just really wasn't the person that I wanted to be. And even though I had a lot of education and everything, and I remember the last time that I had went over some labs with one of my colleagues, and it was the imaging results and my labs, and they looked at me and they said, nothing's wrong. And I could have been reading them wrong, but I honestly feel like I was being gaslit in that moment. And like I was being told to give up the act type of thing. And I was like, I am in horrible pain and I don't want to be like this. And I prayed for God to take away my anxiety and my depression. It's just not happened for me. And so this is something that's very deeply rooted in it's passion. It's a very deep passion for me, and something that I hope to help other people transform their lives with. More people. I have helped hundreds, probably thousands, actually, if I was really doing the math, in functional patients and in students. And so I own the Academy of Functional Medicine, and so I teach this, and I also practice what I preach. I live this life, and I help patients. So I'm so excited to share this with you today. The most important things that I want you to realize in going forward with this is that this is not just something that is going to affect one area of your life. This affects every area of your life. If you have a career, which I know you do because you're here right now, and just based upon my population of people, I know that you have a career and it's probably being affected. I know you have a family and you need, to be able to do these things effectively and not feel burned out and not feel all those things. And so one thing that I want you to note is that you may be an individual, if you have like ADHD or anything like that, or ADHD tendencies like I did. It's actually diagnosed as a young child. That is actually not a bad thing. That is truthfully kind of a superpower. It actually allows you to be more creative. It allows you for you to be able to think outside the box. You usually have a little bit higher ability to negate risk and seize opportunities. However, it's whenever the body is imbalanced and somebody has an ADHD type mind that I believe that's whenever the issue's there. So if we rebalance that, you're able to work completely at a high level. Now, one of the things that can happen in somebody, if you are very anxious, if you have the ADHD tendency, you may actually have what's called you may have a bacterial overgrowth in your gut. And we're going to talk a lot over the next coming days about your gut and that gut brain connection, because that's a huge part of what it is that we are, what we heal in this program. Now, if you are that kind of type that I was talking about, if you're not, don't worry, we're going to get to kind of your type as well. But you probably have a high amount of that dopamine, and it can cause more agitation, impulsivity, even possibly burnout, those type of things. And so one of the ways that we do that is we correct the overgrowth in your gut, because the bacterial overgrowth in your gut can be blocking that dopamine from being able to be broken down. And so dopamine is great. It motivates us, but it's also hindrance because if there's too much of it, because it becomes more agitated. And it's literally kind of what, God, I believe, intended for good. The enemy's trying to turn for evil. However, we can put it back into the right flow. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. One of the things that I want you to also realize is that if you are constantly under stress and you are saying that you can just fight through it, it's really horrible for our life in many different ways. One, it's going to most likely lead to you having a disruptive gut. It's in that way, I mean, more like higher risk for constipation or even nervous diarrhea. Your cortisol is going to be high a lot of the times. That causes adrenaline, and also it decreases your memory. So in the short term, adrenaline can spike our memory. However, in the long term, it actually shrinks your hippocampus, which is your area for memory. It increases your risk for dementia later in life, and it also impairs that long-term potential and your ability to be able to store and use memory. So if you are a career individual, if you want to keep your career, then that is something that you definitely want to protect, is your brain. And what we go through in the program is the NeuroNexusBiome. And the NeuroNexusBiome is broken down into obviously 3 areas. The neuro is the nervous system and also the mindset. So it's the nervous system that we're going to heal, but it's also the things that you're telling yourself. The next part of that is the nexus. And the nexus is the spiritual aspect of this. We are going to get into spiritual aspects, because that is an important part of healing. If you are not healing the spirit, then I do believe that you are not, or tapping into the spirit, I don't believe that you're going to reach your full potential. And then the biome, which is the body, and then also the microbiome itself. One of the first steps that I want you to realize is the role that ultra-processed foods have in our society today. So there was a study in 2024 by the American Academy of Neurology, and they found that over 30,000 participants aged 45 and older, by just increasing their intake of processed foods by 10%, they had a decrease, or I'm sorry, associated with 16% higher risk of cognitive decline, just a 10%. So, and that's really terrifying considering the fact that 70% of our children our children are eating a 70% ultra processed diet. So that's something that's very terrifying. Now, the reason why I say that this is very spiritual based is that this began in the Garden of Eden. So what I mean by that is, in the garden, there was the tree of knowledge, and Adam and Eve ate. It all started with that fruit from the tree of knowledge. And the thing about tree of knowledge is that it was not intended for consumption. It looked like it was consumable. It looked like it was good. It probably tasted good in the moment. It didn't kill them right away. But let's look at what highly processed foods are doing to us today. They taste good. They look like they're good for consumption. They're not killing us right away, but we know for a fact that they're killing us and increasing our risk of disease in a long way and causing suffering. They are also causing anxiety and depression. If you just look at that neurologic study in and of itself, there's a lot of studies also with MSG and a lot of chemicals in our food that it directly causes shame, anxiety, and mental illness. That is also going to spike that cortisol that I was just talking about. So I do believe that it is a different day, but the same trick of the enemy that we are looking at today. And so another thing we're going to look at in this program is also mold toxins. So those can be, everyone is exposed, and about a quarter of people are not able to detox from that because of methylation pathways, or because also of just simply their body and their liver not being fully optimized, or kind of being gummed up from living, kind of the average standard American diet life. So we're going to talk about that and how you can detox in this program, and we're going to be sharing about that. Myotoxins are actually known to induce the glutamate buildup in the brain cells, and that leads to death, brain fog, anxiety, and chronic fatigue. So for about 1 in 4 of you watching this today, that is going to be a part of your treatment protocol. And so whether you believe it or not, you're right. meaning that you can do absolutely anything that it is that you want to set your mind to, but you have to have the right mindset in order to do it. The reason why we look at not only the nervous system, but the things that you tell yourself in this program is because thoughts trigger chemistry. Every thought activates neurocircuits and neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, cortisol, all of that, and affects neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to repattern, strengthen, or weaken those neural pathways. And so this has to do with memory and also whether or not you're recalling positive thoughts or negative thoughts. It reshapes the brain, and it isn't just a reflection of the brain. It literally rewires your neurochemistry. So one of the things that I want to discuss with you today is that, and this is also biblically based. Proverbs 23:7 tells us, "For as he thinketh in his heart, so he is." And don't we just know that now that is completely scientifically true? So one of the things that I want you to do is to look at your deceptive rules or your limiting beliefs. The way that we do that is that I need you to finish this sentence for me. I need blank to be okay. For me, before I started being able to really dive down deep at a level to be able to transform my life, I thought I need to be viewed as successful and very intelligent in order to be okay. Now, that's not a bad thing for me to have that goal. And I'm not saying that that's not still a goal, that I don't want to show up for people to be able to inspire them and help them heal. That's still a part of my goal, but it isn't an identity in and of itself for me anymore, like it used to be. Like my identity is now in Christ, whereas it used to be in that. So the thing about that is it's a deceptive rule. It tells us that we need that in order to be complete, and we really don't, which is why honestly, the gospel is so incredible and can be life-changing. We won't go into that too much here, but it is something that I urge you to discuss with somebody at a really deep level if you are interested in that, because it can transform your life. We often use these identity cores, but we don't attain them. It becomes self-deceptive. We start telling ourselves we're not this because we've hit the standard for it. And self-deception is the worst deception because it is the inconception of the things you least desire. So I want you to define what is the opposite of that deceptive rule. This is probably your most hindering, limiting belief. It's kind of like the Tin Man. If you ever watched that on The Wizard of Oz, he thought that he didn't have a heart, so he was not complete. And he didn't have the physical heart, but what he had was what actually mattered in the heart, which caring and being a friend and all of those things. So it was his limiting belief. It wasn't true. He had a heart. He had the heart that actually mattered and that he actually wanted. And so in that, you probably are in many ways that yourself. So even if you just look at my first bachelor's degree, I was afraid to not be successful. Even if I just stopped there, that would have been a really good goal. That would have been successful, by any kind of standards and needing in this worldly view. That would have been more than enough. As a matter of fact, knowing what I know now about income and how to grow a business and everything, I probably would have stopped had I known what I know now. And so this is something that was a limiting belief for myself. And then the last part of that is I want you to feel this. I want you to really feel at a deep level that, hey, this is me. This is me. What I desire is me. And so I want you to go into that on a really deep level. Deceptive rules can and often are rooted in the four main things here, such as being immoral, irresponsible, feeling flawed or inadequate, feeling unable to trust or unable to relate to people, and also feeling powerless, weak, or inferior. Gentlemen themselves tend to have that last one the most. Women can as well, obviously, but most often it does have to do with more of the gentlemen. Now, I want you to also be a kid in a candy store. And what I mean by that is everything that kind of goes wrong and bad in your life, find a way to look at that positively, because in being able to do that, you can transform your responsiveness to the challenges that you have in your life. So rebalancing those identity priorities to healthy ones. So instead of having an excessive need for love or approval or perfectionism or security or autonomy, entitlement, fear of being perceived as weak or fear of death or running out of time, start to look at things, how you can make it better. And by making it better, you're either finding out like, how is it not as bad as it could have been, or finding value in the outcome that did happen, or learning how to change and look at that as an opportunity for change in your life. Now, one of the things that I love to give to my people is the idea of the kiwi and the eagle. So the kiwi and the eagle are important to me and what I do, because one thing is that the kiwi is on the endangered list. However, the endangerment presented to them is something that they innately can't change. They are the most blind of all birds, and they are a flightless bird. And so they're very easy prey. They're very loud. You can hear them. And so they get captured really easily. And I like to use kiwis as an example. So if you have like naysayers in your life, or you have negative thoughts even in your own mind, what I want you to really think about is this conception of the kiwi, because the kiwi can be really loud. Anyone have any like real loud people, really opinionated, but they don't have vision? They really suck when it comes to vision. They don't see or get what it is that you're doing, or where you're coming from, or why you are the way you are. Well, that's like a kiwi there. And then the eagle, on the other hand, the eagle soars at tens of thousands of feet in the air. And it has the best vision of any bird, I believe. I know that it has a vision 6 times that of a human. So they have incredible vision. And what I love about this is that my favorite Bible, or my favorite book, tells me that without vision, the people will perish. So you're called here today to be that eagle. And here's what happens. And as Bishop Jakes teaches us, what happens in the experience of all lives is that we eat on the level of our vision. So when you start hearing negatively from these kiwis, I want you to realize that it is just simply that the kiwi cannot reach up. The kiwi cannot have the same vision. You cannot explain an eagle decision to a kiwi, because they simply cannot see what it is that you're trying to do. Now, the other part of that is that while some kiwis will peck you from behind, the most dangerous kiwis are the ones that are in your mind. So you need to remind yourself, whenever you start having those negative thoughts, you need to go back over what we discussed here in overcoming your deceptive rules, your limiting beliefs, and say, no, not today, kiwi, not today. Now, the other part of this is that the vision of an eagle means absolutely nothing in the body. Or I'm sorry, the vision of the eagle means nothing if the body and the mind are stuck on the ground. Vision gives you direction, but only a strong body and purpose can give you altitude. And so we're going to start looking and turning towards the body and how we can optimize the body at this point. And some interesting facts that I want you to know about your ailments, especially because I don't want you to feel that your overwhelm is a cause of you being innately bad. There's a 2% increased risk for depression for every unit of CRP that increases. Now, that does not mean that just because somebody has increased CRP that they are automatically that they don't have an increase in CRP, that they don't have depression, they don't have an issue. Inflammation can also be found in a lot of other different ways. But we know that the increased severity of that is there because of the resistance to the body being able to regulate correctly in the presence of that inflammation. Another interesting thing is that you have 39 trillion microbiome cells in your body, and you only contain about 30 trillion cells of your own body. So arguably, from a quantitative standpoint, you are more microbiome bacteria than you are your actual cells. And last, I want you to know the most important statistic of all of these I'm going to teach you tonight is that 80 to 95% of serotonin is actually produced in the gut. So that is where we are going to spend a lot of our time whenever it comes to talking about optimizing. So really cool studies have been done that actually date back to the 1940s, where they took the microbiome of mice and they took the microbiome of anxious mice and injected into mice that were not anxious and caused them to have anxiety symptoms. And the inverse was also true. They were able to reverse anxiety and depression-like symptoms in mice by doing that. Really cool thing is that they have done fecal transplants in tons of different other studies and been able to replicate the same thing. They've even done some of this in human studies and been able to help reverse some autistic symptoms by changing that microbiome. They've even done what I like to call squirrel brain transplants. Now, it's not a brain transplant, it's not an actual squirrel brain. I'm kind of playing with this. But there's been studies also done where they've taken the gut microbiome of humans with ADHD and transferred it into mice And those mice ended up contracting those same tendencies that they exhibited in mice. So really interesting. They also found and tracked a pediatric research study from 2022. They found that the gut microbiome in 314 infants, and at 1 and 6 months old, they checked them. 59 of the children ended up being diagnosed with ADHD, and those did have significantly different microbiomes than the rest, and they were similar to one another. So that's why poor decision-making, insomnia, restless leg, irritable sleep, all of those things can absolutely be tied to your gut. Now, other things we might look at is hypercortisolemia, high cortisol, hormonal disruption, toxic exposure, poor methylation, detox pathways, and spiritual imbalances. And then also what I like to believe to focus on also is just kind of a lack of purpose or spiritual purpose. Now, lipid polysaccharides are also interesting to note because the lipid polysaccharides have been found in individuals of Alzheimer's, and they have found that by injecting that, those are lipid polysaccharides are gram-negative, or they are bacteria that are produced by the gram-negative bacteria that are overgrown in the gut and not supposed to be there. And they've even created a medication that blocks the symptoms of autism that's produced by that LPS itself. So that is something too. That's another reason why you really want to make sure that you're checking your gut, especially if you have any anxiety or depression, because that can lead to anxiety and depression, and it can be an underlying cause, meaning and indicating that you need to treat your Alzheimer's. Now, another thing is polymorphic MTHFR genetic polymorphism, which is where we're 40%. Now, I've seen studies up to 77% of people. I don't know, the number keeps on growing, where people absolutely have to have methylated B12, and that can be a cause of depression, anxiety, ADHD, and everything as well. And then going into the nexus part of the NeuroNexusBiome. So this is where I like to talk about multidimensional vision. And I'm just going to give you a couple. There's a lot of really great studies out there on metaphysics specifically. But I know we're kind of reaching the top end of this. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea of kind of how we're going to build this out. We'll talk a little bit more about it each time. A really interesting thing to note is that there is the entanglement phenomenon that happens that we found in metaphysics. And what I love about this is that they can take one particle, and by affecting that one particle, affect other particles. And so without them being connected or known at all. And I find this to be really interesting because we know that there's Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and one in the same. And then we now have entanglement where we know that we can affect a particle and it changes and does it there. There's also going to be superimposed particles where the particles themselves can be in two different spaces in the metaphysical world is like subatomic. So they're looking at subatomic levels, and they know that the same particle could be in multiple different areas at the same time, which really proves again, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and also us all being one, which I believe is a big part of the spiritual. Another really cool scripture that kind of backs what we're talking about is Philippians 3:18. It says their destiny is their destruction. Their God is in their stomach. And so whenever we go back and looking at Adam and Eve and all of that, the spike in the cortisol, and the Lord tells us not to have fear. And we know that causes diseases. So I find that to be super interesting as well. One of the things that used to really stress me out, especially, is being worried about time and not having enough time. And one of the things in metaphysics I find to be really interesting is that we know, and this isn't even metaphysics, this is just physics in general, we know that as an object speeds up, as an object approaches the light of speed, that time begins to slow down compared to the time on Earth. And it gets slower and slower to the course, slower and slower until it gets to the light achieved. So time is relative, and we know this because it can fly by or it can We can literally watch paint drying. And so whenever we have that spiritual advantage, we know that the Lord can make time for us. And that was one of the things that really changed my life whenever I really started looking into that. So whenever we were from the beginning, we had a 5D vision, and then we fell to 3D vision in the garden, I do believe, when we ate from the tree of knowledge. We learned more, meaning that we could see more, but it did not help us know more. We started to be able to see our imperfections. We started to see the things that were not good for us. And so we were able to see those flaws. We were actually seeing more. It's like putting all the things in front of your mind, like, I'm bad at this, I'm bad at this, I'm bad at this. And that's what's absolutely stopping you. So start removing those things, replacing them with more focused, positive thoughts. And that's what we're going to talk about moving forward. And we're also talking about how you tie that into spiritual aspect as well as your mindset, so your body and your soul and your nervous system. And that's what we're going to be talking about going forward. So I'm sorry I couldn't be live with you all this week, but I hope that this was helpful for you and that it gave you some enlightenment and just encourages you for the going forward, and you have a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be teaching about in this Overwhelm to Overflow. So many blessings. I can't wait to keep working with you. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.